This podcast is made possible in part by Winona, where menopause care is made easy. Winona offers personalized, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy to ease your menopause journey. Discover compassionate care and personalized treatments delivered to your doorstep at bywinona.com. Check your eligibility and start feeling like your best self again, starting today.
Hola, welcome to Word to Your Mama, the podcast that amplifies diverse voices and celebrates shared experiences. Hosted by me, Ritzy P., a Latina creative entrepreneur with a background in art, music, and new web technologies. From Academy and Emmy winners to activists, artists, and builders, we celebrate the rich diversity of my multicultural tribe. There will be special guests, mad laughs, and absolutely no BS. Word to Your Mama drops every Monday on your favorite podcast platform. When people talk about hip-hop, we talk about late 80s, early 90s. Do you ever hear about a Chicana who has contributed so much to the culture? Well, I got that guest on today. This is a long time coming. I've been wanting to have her on since the inception of even having convos like this on Word to Your Mama. And that person is Carmelita Ramirez-Sanchez. She's a Chicana hip-hop veteran. And she's also currently the executive director of the Boyle Art Conservatory. She's such an integral part to my hip-hop LA story. Because of her, I was an intern at the world-famous Wake Up Show with her, Sway, King Tech, and Revolution. And it was at the Beat. The Beat's not even around anymore. It was 92.3 The Beat, I believe it was called. So yes, she saw something in me and she asked me to be an intern. She contributed so much to the culture. She began her on-air radio career when she was only 16. Like, she was sneaking out and she was on air a couple of days a week at UNLV. She said that she'd put the car on neutral and sneak on out. She also worked at Delicious Vinyl. And like I said, she was on world famous Wake Up Show, but not only was she on air, like, her voice was iconic. Every time they were on air, she'd read where they were syndicated. It was like a whole list of cities and countries. And it was like people would always call in and want to hear her do it. It was like one of the highlights of the show. This was live, kids. This was live on air on radio, LA radio, syndicated for days. She's also the first Chicana to be on LA English radio. Like, the first. What was that, the 90s? That's how late it was in the game. Not only was she on air talent to the world famous Wake Up Show, she was also a producer, and she was also the director of marketing for the show. And this was pre-internet, kids. This was when she had to, get on the phone and call folks. So in this episode, I get to thank her. Do I get a little emotional? Sure. Do I try to hold in some tears? Sure do. But I was able to get it out, and we're able to have a conversation. And she was able to tell me how she even saw me and why she even asked me to be an intern. I mean, I didn't find out till when we recorded this early this year. I didn't find out that there was a process on how to be an intern, but I didn't have to go through that process because she just put me up in there, And so to talk about these stories and to hear more of her history, in this episode, we discuss how her father supported her dream of being on the radio when she was 8 years old. He was like, "Oh, sure, Mia, you want to do this? Let me get you a little Fisher-Price tape microphone situation." Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's rare in our community, especially first gen, immigrant communities, where it was not a lawyer, a doctor, or whatever. It was something in the arts. And he was like, yeah, let's do this. So we also talk about what hip hop meant to her. Was she even able to see how much she was contributing to the culture? Also, having those natural skills of walking into a room, analyzing a space, and acting accordingly, whether, as she mentioned, it's code switching, hood switching, or whatever. I mean, especially during that time, if you think about it, she's a couple of years older than me, but during that time, being a woman of color in hip hop, I mean, you've heard previous guests, we talk about that rap life, all the things that we had to go through and knowing how to navigate in a certain way. So she talks about her experience in hip hop. She also talks about how she shifted from being in the music industry, in the radio industry, and pivoting to social and community work as she's now the executive director of the Boyle Heights Art Conservatory, an amazing, amazing organization that does so much for not only the youth in the community of Boyle Heights that's in Los Angeles, but also adults that want to learn different parts of the arts, you know, in front or behind, but mostly behind, right? And then advice for those parents or guardians, they want their children to be actors, because I didn't want to take up a lot of her story talking about how she's the mom of Xolo, who is Blue Beetle. But at the end of our conversation, I wanted to make sure that she gave us the real deal Holyfield of what you should do if your child wants to be an actor, an entertainer of some sort. Because the way I saw her navigate, because I've known Xolo since he was in her stomach, basically. Like, I knew of him and I've seen him grow, and he's such a wonderful, just kind human. And I've seen how she navigated that, and how she was always with him until he was of age. That I saw that was important for other folks that are listening that are parents that might have, especially those that live in LA. Like, I'm sure it crosses your mind how to navigate that and so much more. This is a fantastic conversation. She mentions Babito before he was even anything. He was in the mailroom at the record label. We talk about, like I mentioned, Frank Sosa. We have questions and comments from the audience from Rocca Taylor of Dilated Peoples. And we also have literary veteran Lady Emish, a.k.a. Elisa Garcia, previous guest also, Nabi Productions in the house. And we just have an amazing conversation that I feel so many people can learn from. So let's do this. Carmelita, thank you so much for being here. This is a long time coming. Let's start it off with, how are you doing? ¿Cómo estás?
I'm doing well. Estoy bien. And I'm so happy to see you as well. It's rare that we see each other in person, so this is the next best thing.
Yes. And this is, a lot of people know, and people have been asking and wondering when you're going to be on Word to Your Mama. Because ever since I had the concept of finally doing this show, I was like, Carmelita has to be on there, because you are such a integral part of my journey in life, my hip hop journey, my LA journey, all that stuff. So let's begin with, where were you born and raised, and where are your people from?
Got you. So I was born in Las Vegas, Nevada, and mostly raised in Las Vegas, but then I left at a little bit under 18. I left to go to school in Mexico City. I went to Televisa, had a school there for sports journalism. So I was part of that program. Yeah, I was part of that program. But I was a sports entertainment reporter. It's just a position I made up. And my family has been, my abuelo got to Las Vegas in 1903. So he went there as a bracero program to build the freeway, the Union Pacific Freeway through there. He's originally from Longosura, Michoacan. And my dad is from Mexico City, and his family is also multi-generational Mexico City residents. So we are Mexicanos from way of both Michoacan and DF.
Wow, that's crazy. And then after that, you were in Vegas for a while, and then ended up back in LA?
First in LA. So I went to high school, obviously my school career. And then I had that opportunity. I had a scholarship to go to Mexico City. So I did the Mexico City thing. And then went back to Vegas for a little while, continued at UNLV. And then I got a call that they were hiring a college radio intern at Arista Records. So I drove down to LA to interview for the job. And then by the time I came back on my answering machine was like, hey, if you want the job, it's yours. So essentially that's how I came back to LA.
That's crazy. So, you're a hip hop legend, and I feel like more people need to know about you as a woman, as a Latina. You're an on-air radio host. You worked at Delicious Vinyl. You're part of the world famous Wake Up Show as on-air host, but maybe people might not know that you're also the producer and director of marketing. You helped get it global. In a time, folks, kids that are listening, in a time where there was no social media, internet was just a thing. Like you are on, pounding the pavement, on the phone, doing all the things. So what does hip hop mean to you? And, last year was just like the 50th birthday of hip hop. I mean, that's debatable, but why hip hop? What does it mean to you and why hip hop?
All right, well, first of all, thank you very much, by the way. Those are really kind words and I appreciate it. And hip hop, it's interesting, and you probably feel the same. When you grow up in something, I don't know if you necessarily take in both the magnitude and the importance of something when you are intertwined in it, because the moments are happening in real time. So, of course, in hindsight, you could look back and say, I was at this moment in history. I was able to encapsulate this into my brain as a memory. But certainly when that is happening, you don't look at it as a memory. So the thing about hip hop is that it's consistent, and almost not really by accident, but really just a manifestation of what my life was. So in addition to starting my first job at Arista, there wasn't really, with say one or two exceptions, there wasn't anything that you would call hip hop radio or mix show presentation, anything like that. So as I moved into my career, this is just where I gravitated because this is what I listened to. Some of my earliest friendships in the business when I was in college radio in Las Vegas, I started my radio career at 16. So I was a high school student that was on the air at college radio. Some of my first friendships and relationships were, for instance, Babito, who was the mailroom guy at Def Jam, who I just happened to cold call and he picked up and was like, yeah, what do you need? I'll send you whatever you want. And Orlando from Delicious Vinyl, who years later after I moved to Vegas was like, come on, let's see what job we have for you. So it is just, this was a moment in history that you are surrounded by people that are moving history with you as well. So hip hop to me is how I grew up. It is what was part of my journey because it was happening while I was happening. It was important because I was moving through those moments as well, both professionally in the industry as a label and then personally to have these amazing moments in my life that really were dictated by just being in the moment, being in that time, being in the right city, being in the right place, being fortunate enough to be at a radio station, a little college radio station that sent me to New York a few times a year to go to conventions. And of course, New York being the epicenter, you just couldn't help being surrounded by really this magic of history. Well, now it's history, but back then it wasn't. It was just what was happening.
It was what was happening. It was so new and exciting. But going back, tell us, how were you 16 and doing a radio show at college? What's that little story right there?
Yeah, well, my radio journey started at 8. I told my dad, I want to be that voice that comes out of the radio. So he went in and he purchased me a little Fisher-Price tape recorder and it had a microphone on it. And he was like, well, you got to start practicing. So at 8, 9, 10, I would just practice. I would be like, you're listening to blah, 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 and hey, this is the latest music. So I would practice these things. And then at 16, I had the opportunity to intern at the radio station. So I was the person that would go and get the records, tape them up, make sure that they were in good working orders, because these were still albums at the time. So make sure that the albums were clean. I would log in the new music that came in. And one of the shifts that I was on while I was doing that, the DJ, for whatever reason, fell asleep and never woke up again. He was just like asleep the entire shift. And I'm looking at that record and I'm looking at him and I realized that record's about to end. And there are certain FCC regulations that are taken very seriously. And one of those is called illegal ID. So I'm looking at the clock. I'm looking at him. I'm looking at the record ending. And I was like, I need to actually open the mic. I need to at least say the legal ID. And that's what I did. And from that moment on, I was like, oh, I really love being on the air. I love this microphone. I love being able to talk on here. And I was given at 16, the 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. shift. I imagine labor laws weren't something that people really were concerned about. And I just used to sneak out of the house, twice a week. I used to sneak out of the house twice a week. I did my Tuesday shift and my Thursday shift, and I would go out the window. I would put the car in neutral. I would let it go downstairs. I'd drive to UNLV, and I'd do my radio show, and I'd come back in and with enough time to be like, yeah, I just got ready for school. I had my uniform on, ready to go to school. And that actually sleep pattern is something that unfortunately has followed me my whole life, because then, you go from being a young person on the air to being a young person that's traveling because you're in the music industry, to being someone that is dictated by global radio shows. To your point, right. There wasn't an internet. I wasn't going to send you some kind of message or anything. So I had to stay up for the New York shows. And then I had to be up for the shows in Europe and the shows in, in some of the Caribbean areas. I just had to be up for those shows as well. So my 4 hours sleep, my son always makes fun of me. He's like, how do you function on 4 hours sleep? It's cultivated, my dear. I've built this my entire life.
That's crazy. So at 8 years old, you wanted to be on the radio, but why? Like, what were you exposed to prior to that made you, that's your root? What made you be like, I hear that, I want to be that?
Well, just remember what it was like being in a car at a young person. Your parents listened to the radio. They weren't listening to a podcast. They didn't have something plugged in. Maybe they had a tape or a CD or something like that. But really, eight-track. If you wanted to move beyond the things you personally owned, the records you personally owned, you were going to listen to the radio. And that radio experience was just so powerful to me. And much to my dad's credit, his kid came and said, I would like to have this maybe job that maybe I'm never going to make any money at and probably doesn't exist. And he was like, right. Yeah, mija, let's do it. And I think I always credit that moment or that experience, right, which is so different than many of us go through. Right. When you want to be in the industry, they're like, "Estás loca? What do you mean you want to be in the industry?" And we'll chat about it later, but that really dictates what I do now. That moment, right, when a parent was like, yes. And also a parent that wasn't like, you have to follow somebody else's path. Right. You go from here to college to graduate to this, that. And that just wasn't my dad. He was like, this is the thing that's calling you. This is the thing that's calling you.
That's amazing because, like you said, it doesn't really happen, especially in our families, in our type of families, especially with our fathers, if we even have access to them, if they're even in our life. So you had like all these amazing little chunks of someone seeing you, someone supporting you. So without trying to get emotional, this is like a great opportunity for me to say thank you to you because, I was just out on my own in LA. I graduated from Long Beach and I was just like, hip hop music is this thing. Hip hop is this thing. I don't even know. I can't even remember. I don't know if you remember, but I
I met you, and then I remember you asked me to be an intern at the world famous Wake Up Show.
I absolutely remember. I absolutely remember.
Like, it's like a blur for me. Like, so I just wanted to say, muchísimas gracias for seeing me. And like, I've had Rachel on here. I've had Mona Lisa on here. And we talk about, you know, right. We talk about our rap life, you know, being women in not even just music, in hip hop. During that certain time, I just finished listening to a podcast on NPR. They were supposed to have Kim Osario on from The Source, you know, because she did that book and she had that, you know, that groundbreaking case against The Source. And, you know, this is 20 something years after that. She decided to pull herself off of that story on NPR because she was threatened. But the story remains, it's already done. And they're talking to people that worked at The Source during that time, other women. The shit that we had to deal with, the ingrained patriarchy and self-hate of seeing other women. And I talk about it now in what I do, like the crabs in the barrel mentality. But in that time for me, there was a few amazing women that saw me and pulled me up. And you were one of those people.
Yeah, I thank you. And I do very clearly remember it was Frank. It was Frank Sosa. If you remember, he was in my office one day, and I don't know what made me start this conversation with him. And then he was like, "Oh, you got to meet. You know, you have to meet Marisa. You have to meet her." And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Have her come by." And I think the difference to maybe that mentality was I'm a little bit older than you all. So there's not necessarily, and I'm not saying this is the reason why it's difficult to be a woman in the industry, but it wasn't competitive. It was really like, who is the next, like that next ally? Who am I pulling up in me and to surround myself? And to your point, I feel that way about Mona Lisa. I feel that way about a lot of young women in the industry and young men. Of course, we had men interns as well. And I really think it was because it wasn't a threat. It wasn't threatening. I've never really looked at, I mean, honestly, I've never really looked at anybody in my surrounding as a threat to my personal growth, to how I was going to move. And you know how I am. That's just not my DNA. But there was, and not because it's you only, but there was definitely something about you that reminded me, about you. There was your tone, your cadence, the way you were very comfortable around a room. And once again, not threatened by the room, which is a very good, like, skill set to have, to be able to walk into a space and to analyze the space and to know this is how I'm going to conduct myself in the space, whether it's code switching or hood switching or understanding like how you need to be in that space. I think that was just learned behavior from me. I don't know. I had an interesting life where there was, you know, half of it was very questionably legal, and the other half of, you know, I grew up with a mom who was going to be a nun before she came back to Vegas, and a dad who definitely wasn't going to be anything in that category. So maybe just as a young person, learning how to like manipulate conversations and rooms and areas. And that was something I just thought was so important as I was moving forward in my career, and still think it's important, and still speak to the women that I went up with and the women that I was able to have the privilege of in some way, in some small way, mentoring or being a femtor, anything in that area. And they continued that. Right. That's what I feel is the win. These women, you, the other women around my life, they continued that process. So whatever that seed was continued. And I'm just incredibly grateful for that. even knowing that there was a small part of me that made that happen.
Well, muchísimas gracias. I mean, like, I think, especially now hearing your story, how you knew at a young age, you had that initial support that I think was very vital in your story. And you know how some of us are just born a certain way. You came into this world like an old soul. I say that too. Like, I'm an old soul. Like, we kind of been here before. You were so secure in yourself and what you did that I think that's why you didn't feel threatened. You're just like, oh, here's another, person. And I feel that's very important. That's looking back now. I see that in you. I see that in, my other boss that, really saw me and helped me to was like, well, you could do this. You could do this. Like, when people see you, because they're not threatened, they're just like, oh yeah, this is, like you said, you saw a little bit of yourself in me. That's amazing. That's like an honor. And, I wanted also to know, we talk about the shit that we had to do. Knowing your story now and knowing how secure you were, I know there's a grip of shit that we don't have to get into in that time of you being a woman in hip hop. But because you were so secure, did you have to do the things that we talked about? Rachel, Dr. Ramus, and Mona Lisa, we talked about dressing down and baggy. And it's crazy because when I was listening to that podcast, I forget her name, I think Aaliyah, she worked at Source. She was like, we're all talking about dressing down and baggy, trying not to cause attention because you're such in a male dominated world. Like, did you deal with that at all? Was that even a thing for you?
So funny. And I don't know if you remember that I was the complete opposite. I was like the mini skirt wearing,
I do.
The right. Form fitting, this was not a concern per se of my life, because
right.
I think that just my style, I grew up having a very specific, rude girl mod, ska style that I grew up my entire, even when I'm in hip hop, that part couldn't change because I'm a thrift store shopper. I'm a skirt wearer. I'm a dress wearer. I'm not anymore, but that was something that was really important in my life, making sure I had that consistency. And even looking back recently, Dina sent me this picture and I was looking back at it, and it was in, I want to say it was 1989. So I was a kid. I don't even think I was 21 yet. And I'm looking at this picture and it's KRS-One and it's D-Nice and I think Tribe's in it as well. Maybe a few other people. And I looked at the picture and I look like such a freaking weirdo because they're dressed the way they're dressed.
Right.
And I literally have a Fred Perry, like a checkered skirt on. This was just how I looked. This is what I did. So I think that maybe my ignorance in I don't even know how to dress that way. I don't know how to wear, I didn't grow up wearing Dickies. I didn't grow up wearing that look. Right. So I didn't even know how to dress that way. That's number one. And then the other factor, which was very curious, and maybe you had the same experience, is that it was acknowledged from an early age and known that I could fight. I can scrap.
Right.
And I think that there was just something about that was like, okay, that's not like, dude or not, I can scrap. And I definitely think, and has happened on stages before, and has had me being, physically moving people off stage, moving people off. And you and I are kind of like the same structure. We're small women. We're not big women, but I also think in some way that played into it as well, because it was just an understanding. It was understood that that's probably not a good route to go to. So not of interest, not of interest to have that. So in a way, my experience in the business was different to some of my other peers and some of my other women peers, not because I was tougher or more respected or anything like that. I just think that there was, for whatever reason, an understanding that maybe wasn't the best route to go with me. And with that being said, there was plenty of disrespect, as you can imagine, that went on. And now in hindsight, realizing that disrespect was really it was informed by people that they themselves were insecure. They themselves were not in a space where they owned anything or where they had stability or where they had judgment of foresight. Like looking back at the times that there were conflicts in my life or the times I was disrespected, I look back now and I realize they themselves didn't respect themselves.
Right.
So how are you going to get respect out of that?
That's real. And that's crazy because I do remember now, like your outfits. For me, looking back, me being, newer into the scene and also being an intern and kind of like just learning and navigating, I thought, oh, Carmelita doesn't have to deal with that. She's paid her dues. Like so it's fascinating to hear that it's kind of, you didn't know any other way. Like I was always a tomboy anyway. So I wasn't, it wasn't like I was, and I remember like patriarchy, dude, the patriarchy. I remember in the beginning going to like, Unity and all those things and all the shows and all the, wake up shows, the live ones. And, being one of only a few women in there and we were just all, dressed however. And then when women started going in, dressing, being more into hip hop and going to the live shows and dressing with high heels and stuff. I remember I was mad about it. Like to keep it 1,000. I was just like, what is this? Like, how can she be a real hip hop fan? Like, she's not here. Like, she's not here for the right reasons. Like, I was just kind of like, to keep it real, I hate her. Like, so it's very interesting. Now I look back, I was like, oh, it's because it was so ingrained in me. Like, I was perpetrating the same shit kind of, but we're evolved. But I wanted to talk. Go ahead.
I was going to say, even that moment that you're describing right now. So I grew up in a different scene. I grew up in, the reason why hip hop is important to me is because I grew up in a time when your clubs had hip hop on Friday and then some kind of new wave, new music, ska on Saturday. And sometimes the youth would get confused which day was what. So you would integrate. Yeah. I grew up in a lot of punk rock shows, and that phenomena that you're talking about, I used to call the cheerleader phenomenon, because there was a time when I was in high school, probably my sophomore year, that the women at these shows kind of flipped, and you saw these like umbrella term cheerleader types that were coming. Right. And I had the same feeling you did. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? And then to see that like, oh wait, actually those men like that. They're like, the people that I thought were super, I don't know, like grungy, like, like really punk rock, like that really punk rock feel. Right. I was like, oh, they're all dating cheerleaders now. And I thought that was such an interesting thing, that moment is kind of the moment you're describing. Cause I was like, why are you even here?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
What is that? But that is that's that ownership, right? We were here first and now you're coming and I have this ownership. Right. And even Unity is a great example because, another thing I'm known for in Los Angeles is I was the person at the door. Right. I was the person with the clipboard. I was the person who had your guest list. And I do clearly remember that moment where all of a sudden you're like, did you come to the wrong club? Like, are you, and not in a snarky way, but literally in a concerned way. Yeah. Are you sure you want to go in there dressed like you are and being who you are, right? Like maybe a little bit of a concern of that, like, so a fight's going to break out. Right. Something's going to happen.
Right. Because I don't, for the younger folks, for the young whippersnappers that are listening, hip hop wasn't this all-encompassing, all-inclusive, kind of like watered down thing that it can be, especially when you go to clubs. We're talking about like rough, rugged, and raw, like hip hop joints. So to see that, it was such a contrast. And that's why it was a little bit of concern. Like, what the fuck? But also like, why? Like, are you sure? Like,
what
like
the
you
fuck?
said, are you sure?
What the fuck?
Yeah, exactly. The two levels of that. Mm-hmm. So going back to the Wake Up Show, who asked you and was Rev part of that in the beginning? Like who asked you to be a part of
Rev
that?
was not part of the Wake Up Show when I showed up. And Jennifer Norwood, my colleague Jennifer Norwood, who was at Priority Records, I think at that time, she was at Priority And I was at, I either had just left Interscope or was at Delicious Vinyl already. It was like a crossover. And part of being in the record industry means you have to show up to these shows. And right prior to that, by the way, I was on the Baker Boy show. I was actually the news person on the Baker Boy show. So on Friday Night Flavors. But I had to go to all the shows as a record. And I remember I was there dropping off a record, and then Tech was given this contest or something to read, and he's like, I don't want to do this. He's like, do you know how to read copy? And I looked at him and I was like, yeah, I know how to read copy. I understand what that is. So I did the giveaway, and and then he looked at me and goes, oh, do you know how to be on the radio? Yeah. I know a little bit about being on the radio, right? And then he's like, can you come back next week? And that just, between Jennifer Norwood and myself, Jennifer was the first woman on the Wake Up Show. She was the one that was really integral to being able to move that show forward, because remember, they came from the Bay. And she was here already. She's not from LA, but she had been in LA long enough that she was part of that scene. So Jen Boogie was like, yeah, just, come and make that happen. And I think that there were a few things that worked in my favor. I think being a Chicana in Los Angeles is helpful on radio. And I think even at that time, I was, sadly to say, even on that show, the first Chicana on LA radio. Right. Which is insane when you think about how do you say that? Well, English language radio, exactly. Right? That doesn't make sense now when you think about our radio landscape. So I think maybe some of it was like, it makes sense to have her on the show. And then definitely the other part of it was, I understood business. I understood that the way to move the show forward was really going to be from a marketing and syndication point of view. And I think it just kind of grew from that.
That's fantastic, because, some people were like, oh, I only know it especially when I came on, they were like, oh, I love Carmelita. I love her. The dudes will be like, I love her voice. I love when you do, when you say where, that's like legendary when you say where you're all syndicated from, where you're at. And I remember like going and being so nervous, and I don't know who said for me to be in the studio and be on Pro Tools and record the drops, because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And you loved me because you asked me to be there. Sway loved me. Like, he would sing my name like the Maria Santana song. Like, he loved me.
Oh, yeah.
Tech despised me. Did not like me at all. I bet you he was like, why the fuck is she here? And one time you weren't there. I don't know why you weren't there. And then Sway was like, yo, no one knew me as Ritzy then. That wasn't Ritzy yet. So he's like, yo, Marissa. He's like, you want to read it? And I was like, not really. I was nervous. I was like, no, plus that's Carmelita's thing.
Something I hear from so many women in their 40s and 50s is, oh my gosh, is it hot in here? Or is it just me? But seriously, hot flashes, fatigue, and other uncomfortable symptoms associated with menopause can make you feel like you're not yourself anymore. If you're thinking, yes, that's me, I'm excited to introduce you to Winona. They're making menopause care easier with bioidentical treatments delivered to your door. The best part? Their HRT is made with plant-based bioidentical hormones, not synthetic ones. This means they're identical in molecular structure to those your body already produces, so you can feel your best naturally. And with 80% of Winona patients experiencing relief in just 90 days, it's no wonder they have a 5-star rating on Trustpilot. So if you're tired of struggling with menopause symptoms, visit ByWinona.com and check your eligibility today. Once again, that's BYWINONA.com.
This is your friendly reminder to take a deep breath. Este es tu recordatorio para que respires profundo. Take a deep breath in. Inhala profundo. Exhale as you observe your breath, letting all the air out. Exhala, observando tu exhalación, dejando salir todo el aire. Would you like to help me reach my mission of teaching meditation to 1 million children? ¿Te gustaría ayudarme a alcanzar mi misión de enseñar meditación a 1,000,000 de niños, I invite you to join me in the Decide Balance Oasis, a safe space where families can find bilingual meditations and mindfulness practices and so much more. Te invito a que te unas conmigo en el Decide Balance Oasis, un espacio seguro donde las familias pueden encontrar meditaciones bilingües y prácticas de atención plena y mucho más. Go to decidebalance.com for more details. I'll see you in the Oasis. Visita decidebalance.com para obtener más información. Nos vemos en el Oasis.
Gracias for listening to Words Your Mama. I have a unique cross-section of guests on here because I'm a consultant who thrives at the intersection of creative innovation, tech, and community impact. There are a variety of ways we could work together, so check out ritzyperrywinkle.com to learn more. Link in the bio.
And then he's like, no, just do it. And I was like, okay. And I was about to do it. And Tech was like, nah. Grabbed the paper. He was like, nah. I was like, okay.
Yeah, to Tech's credit, he is widely not known as the diplomatic guy on the show. Yeah. But I don't even know if it was that he despised anyone, across the board. But I just think that he's very insular.
Mm.
He has his crew. That crew is the same. We just had dinner last week.
I saw the photo.
Yeah, Cholito was in town for a few hours, so we all went and had dinner. Like, that is his comfort spot. The people that he came up with, that is what he's comfortable in. And I think also maybe his style and personality doesn't read as super welcoming. But once he's your guy, he's your guy forever.
Right. That's
right?
funny. Well, next time we talk to him, he probably's like, I don't know who that is. He'll probably like, I don't know who you're talking about.
He remembers all the interns.
Really?
I'll literally say to him, hey, this guy hit me up on Instagram. Who is? He's like, oh, he was that intern from da-da-da. I was like, oh, I remember now. The only interns I really technically keep up with are you and Renee. Remember Renee? Do you remember him?
I kind of do.
Kind of, yeah. So those are the ones that I keep up with. But every now and then they'll be like, oh, yeah, I was on the show from this time. Awesome.
I believe you.
Right. Because other than how you came to be an intern, there was a process to be an intern on the Wake Up Show. There was an application, you had to answer certain questions. It was you didn't go through that process, but there is a process. And there was a process to be an intern on the Wake Up Show.
Wow. Well, again, muchísimas gracias. That's awesome. And also, continued shout out. I just had, B+ on here at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And just everyone across the board, there's always a shout out to Frank Sosa. Frank Sosa is another person I've been wanting to just reconnect with and just have on here también because he's helped me too. Listening to this, So let's get into the questions and comments from the audience. All right. It's a comment first, and then we'll go into the question. It says, thank you for supporting Dilated through the years and for all of your work in helping to push hip-hop culture forward before, during, and after the Wake Up Show. Thank you for being a bridge builder. We appreciate you. So let's go into the question part. Hip-hop is obviously a part of who you are, but was there a particular situation or realization that shifted your daily focus from dealing with the hip-hop industry to doing more social and community support work? And that is from our friend, our familia, Raka from Dilated Peoples. And this is great. I was going to ask you about this, but let me go into the questions so we can get into what, doing now.
Yeah. And I promise I will not tell the famous, to me, Evidence story of why Evidence and I took 25 years to even become cool with each other.
Please tell us.
But Raka knows the story. So that moment is very crystal clear in my mind. I remember being at Delicious Vinyl, and as I mentioned yesterday, sometimes I had to be there 11, 12 o'clock at night because you had to talk to shows all around. So I'm there. It's pitch dark, right? And one of our artists comes up and doesn't realize I'm there, by the way. Comes up. It's late at night. and they were coming to pick up some records to sell. Like, maybe not lucrative now, but you could sell records at errands or at other places. And I was like, hey, what's up? Names there. He's like, oh, you could tell he was really embarrassed. He's like, I just need money for diapers. At that time, this artist had a top 10 record. And I remember thinking, you need money for diapers and not for anything that this young man was doing or not doing.
Right.
The moment really crystallized in my mind two things. People don't understand the business. And number two, labels don't want you to understand the business. Right. Because even having my love has always been publishing, performance rights publishing, understand the breakdown. I'm a nerd for it. I love it. I will sit down and have conversations for hours with young men and women about like, oh, you think you're going to put out a record? What are you going to do for publishing? Right.
Right.
And I really thought the most important conversation we can have is business with these young men. And then this moment and this conversation multiplied itself through the years as I sat down with artists at the label and artists outside the label, even explaining. Right. You would be, I think, shocked how many top 10 important artists didn't even understand, oh, you actually don't have any publishing money coming because your producer decided he's going to sample 70 songs in this one thing. And, oh, I see you didn't write your lyrics. So you actually will never have production of publishing money coming from me. Right. And these conversations led me to understand that the greatest gift that we can give any generation or any young people is that kind of knowledge. Right. And understanding. And that really shifted me even I actually left Delicious Vinyl because it hurt to work there for so long. It hurt me I left a very, very well-paid job to work for free at the Wake Up Show. I just shifted over. Now, of course, I always loved business. So I was able to financially, I was okay. Like I'm fine in that aspect, but I left that job because I can't do it. I can't see these guys coming in here and these women coming in here anymore and not have ownership of stuff and not have understanding of stuff. And even now I realize this was not it was the business. So it wasn't as if anybody was targeting them. It wasn't as if anybody was, it wasn't intentional, right? It was baked into the business. So intentional in that way. That's how,
right.
If everybody does something, then you're okay because everybody does something. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't, it was really hurting. And this was even before having my son or anything. I just knew that right. I don't want to be unhelpful. I don't want to be part of that system that is just grinding down, especially Black and brown young right. men, especially right. that grind down. I just couldn't do it anymore.
Wow. That's crazy, that moment. And you know what? And I don't know how it is now, but there's still, I think there's still a lot of education that needs to be done. And I feel that you're doing a great service, providing a great service. If you want to tell the folks what you're doing now, your title and the organization, a little bit more about the organization.
Yeah, sure. I will do just that. So I am the executive director of the Boyle Heights Arts Conservatory. We're actually inside shift a little. We're inside our room. It's not just a toy room. This is where we keep all our supplies and our stuff here. So I came in here because the internet is apparently better in here. So here I am. And we are a nonprofit that very specifically focuses on career introduction, career pathways, and workforce development for young men and women in Los Angeles in film, television, digital media, and music production. So not the person on the mic or the person in front of the camera, but all those the landscape of jobs around that industry is what we are primarily interested in. And most of the work we do, over 70% of the work we do is with young men and women who are currently incarcerated inside LA County system. So we introduce, whether the class is beat making or whether it's photography, filmmaking, editing, understanding those skill sets. Then we take that and we work with them. And once they come home, once they return, then they're able to keep up their skills. And the other percentage are just young people. We don't have really an age barrier. So our oldest students are in their 70s and 80s. And there are people that are learning. I liked poetry at one point in my life. I'd love to know how to write, or I want to understand how to take pictures. I want to take pictures of my grandkids. I want to do that. And all of those are, to me, they're important in that I want our industry to be reflective of the population in Los Angeles.
Right.
It doesn't look like that. You'll go on any set. There's pockets where it does look like Los Angeles, but for the most part, and even those pockets that it does look like Los Angeles, not anybody writing any checks. That's for sure.
Right.
Not anybody that is in those very high floors in the building.
Right.
They don't look like us. They don't talk like us. They don't come from us. And I see a shift in that there is more of a recognition that this does have to happen. And I'm not talking about like that fabricated diversity inclusion department, not that. But I think that there's a shift in that young people that are coming into this business are bringing other people into this business that they're comfortable with. And this is what we do here. We want to prepare people by giving them the skills so that there's no argument. If you are at the same level as somebody that went to, I don't know, CalArts to study engineering or anything like that, and you are at that same level, all things considered, you should be given that same shot. And that's really what we focus on here at the Boyle Heights Arts Conservatory.
And I really love what you guys have done all of these years and continue to do, because I think it's really important. Like you said, it's the knowledge, and just some of us, especially in Black and brown communities, we don't even know that there's all these different, like, I can't be in the industry because I'm not a singer or rapper. Well, there's all these behind the scene things, and that's how we get people in. Mm-hmm. Like I had Linda Morel on here, Emmy Award winning producer, and she talked about being on the Black Lady Sketch Show and them saying, I want our entire team Black. Well, they're not there. The van driver, the grips, they're not there. And why aren't they there? It's because our communities don't even know that those are jobs. Those are things that exist, that you can work so many hours, get hours, be a part of the union. Like, we don't know that. So slowly but surely, we need to disperse the information and the knowledge and the exposure like you guys are doing. I mean, something as that some people might think is insignificant is huge. I love and always try to amplify when I see all the amazing free programming that you provide for the community, and also something as simple as free breakfast on Saturday, cartoons and breakfast with an artist that's going to show you how to draw. You know what I'm saying? Like you're getting exposed while you're doing things that you love, like, Saturday morning cartoons.
Well, that is a memory that really is informed by my own memory of being a young person and having these parents come in here for cartoons and cereal, and being able to see these 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds that at the end of the lesson, they're like, I understand what a line artist is. I understand what a voiceover artist. I understand this was engineered. They're little, but we talk about, you want to be a fireman? You want to be a doctor? Want to be a nurse? We talk about that from the beginning, and we should be comfortable talking about these jobs. And parents that come here are like, I know that I wasn't given these opportunities, and to have my child be able to come in here. We have podcasting classes that start at 6 years old. Our Pod Pals class is from 6 to 9 years old. That's that kid. That's that kid that's going to say, I want to be the voice on the microphone.
Right.
I understand this. So this is just the glow up version of my dad giving me a Fisher Price.
See?
Tape recorder, right? Like, this is just like, no, you're going to go into a full studio. You're going to go into a full studio. You're going to learn how to do that. We had a young man here 2 years ago that He was at that time a 13-year-old, and he designed the official celebrity NBA jersey for All-Star. A 13-year-old. Converse came to us and said, hey, we have this opportunity. We're going to do this. And the other people that applied across the country, these were, 18 over adults, and our kid comes in and he's 13. He won. That was the jersey the West Coast wore, the jersey that he came up with. And this was obviously a young person whose family was supporting him, whose dad was like, yes, mijo, you want to do this? Let's do it. Whose mom was like, the cheerleader, right? The way they act like when we're the star on the soccer team or when we're the star on the basketball team, that's what his parents were. And that is really, his name was Ness, Little Ness. His dad's name is Ness. He's Little Ness. And that is really, to me, what I find so fulfilling about what I do, that parents come back in and say, I don't understand what he's doing, and I don't really get why he wants to do it, but I know he wants to do it. And I want to be the one that's supporting that.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing to recognize that in your child and see the passion. Like, I don't understand it, and maybe it scares me. Maybe it scares me because I'm not sure if it's stable as what we're taught to think about. But yeah, no, that's amazing. Let's go into the second question and comments from the audience. It says, your amazing career has spanned a very significant period in broadcasting. You have worked directly in the industry at various levels and witnessed first and how technology has pushed people onto the internet and streaming platforms to get their news, music, and pop culture. What do you think is the future of public radio? What does it look like? And how can radio stations remain relevant? And this is by a previous Word to Your Mama guest, legend in the literary world, co-host of Heartbreak Radio, our girl, Familia, Elisa Garcia.
That is my girl. And Sol, I've texted you twice in the past 2 weeks, so maybe technology is not your thing. Yeah. So I hear that question a lot. Here's the interesting thing, because we live in Los Angeles.
Right.
Radio is actually still very relevant. Our cars still have radios. They've even added ways for us to have more radios, right? The HD stations, middle of the dial stations. And internationally, radio is still very important. I know that as people that live in this colonized world, we think our opinion is the only opinion, right? That matters. But if you travel across, you travel a lot, actually. Obviously, you travel a lot with your partner, and you see, oh, radio's still a thing. Right. Radio's still important. You go into areas where they get one little 100-watt, 50-watt antenna, and they put it up, and they're able to communicate. When our systems are able to get information through, whether it's from Palestine or from Japan or from New York, from wherever, when we're able to communicate with each other, we're able to do it at this very rudimentary technology, the 100-year-old technology of radio. When earthquakes happen, when our power lines go out, the one thing that'll be consistent, even without internet, is radio.
Word.
That's consistent. So I think that there obviously is the perception that radio is not that important anymore because people don't listen to radio. And I agree with that. I think that does happen. Public radio, that's a different thing. Public radio audiences actually grow continuously because that's kind of a different format and different model. But radio is still significant. Radio still does change because radio is very local and very personal.
Right.
So when you have, like we have, a community radio station that really only broadcasts for 8 miles in the radius, in Los Angeles, 8 miles is almost 350,000 people.
Right.
And growing, right? Like just Boyle Heights area and beyond. Those are important things. That's like very hood related conversations, very personalized conversations. And I think radio, if anything, radio going back to that is a great thing because it really does allow you to understand each other in a way that's personal and not necessarily, I saw on Instagram this happened or I saw a video on TikTok or XYZ. Those things, of course, are mass produced experiences, But I'm talking about a very personal experience, the very personal experience of, I actually know that person on the air.
Right.
Or I feel like I know that person on the air. I wouldn't necessarily say that all the nails are in the coffin of radio. I just think that there's an evolution and a shift in radio that continues to happen in that art form.
Right. So are you guys still doing the programming for the radio station and stuff like that?
Yeah. We have 63 shows on the air right now, and we're currently training 7 new spots to be on the air as well.
Dope. Okay, so let's get into the final part of this. I've taken so much of your time already. The not so rapid fire questions, the AKA slow as hell questions. Are you ready?
Ready.
3 words to describe yourself.
3 words to describe myself. I am scrappy. I'm, I'd say very direct. I'm very direct. And I'm a mom.
Right. What's the best piece of advice you received?
The best piece of advice I ever received was, don't take it personal. It's not personal. It really is not. And I always try to say that to myself when somebody's wilding out on me. It's not personal. You don't know what kind of day you had. Even if it's that woman at the coffee shop who's going to just cut in front of you. I don't know. I don't know what kind of day they had.
Right. That's real. What's the song that you play when you need to get hyped?
The song that I play when I need to get hype. That's I always feel like I'm always hype. So almost the opposite of that when I need to calm the fuck down. But yeah, I have a moment of walking out into the streets of New York and listening to Public Enemy. And just remembering, holy shit, this is a thing. Right. So when I hear My Uzi Weighs a Ton, it does something to my inner child that, oh man, I get so excited when I hear that song. I love that. I love that feeling. And I imagine that the things that hype us up is really those moments that put us back into a time and age, anything like that.
For real. Well, that song is going to be added to the Word to Your Mama guest hype list song. I always mess up the name, but we're up to like 4 or 5 hours, and it's not the first time that Public Enemy has been added, but that song for sure. I'm excited to hear it again and picture you in the streets of NYC. Final question, Carmelita, what will be your legacy?
Oh that's so simple. My kids will be my legacy. My biological children and every child that has walked through here. That's my legacy. That's a no-brainer.
That's amazing. So, I didn't want to take a big chunk out of your story to mention this, but I have been asked to ask you, being a mom of a super uber talented, wonderful human being of a young man that's out there, even he's out there in the streets, is very, very polite and thoughtful. Any advice you would have for someone that their child wants to be an actor?
That's a great question. And, both of my children are actually in the industry in very different ways. Like my son, he's very forward facing in the camera. My daughter does a majority of her work on voiceover, and she's a theater kid. So they're very different in that aspect, but they both did the same thing of like coming to me. Sholo, when he was very young, he's like, I want to be on TV. How do you do that? How do I want to be on TV? He was maybe like 8. And my daughter was really more understanding of, I really like voiceover. I don't like people looking at me. I want to just use my voice. So knowing that, and obviously my situation is a little different because I knew who to call. I knew the calls to make. I knew, but I get this question a lot of people that don't have that ability. And I always ask if your kid came to you and said, I want to be like a world famous basketball star, or I want to be on the best soccer team in the world, you would find out how that could happen. And I think that we shouldn't limit ourselves to find out how that can happen when what they want to do is be an actor, be in front of the camera, be a voiceover artist. So the simple things are, regardless of where you are, find out who are your industry players in that world. Whether it's you're going to get on the internet, you're going to look up, child agencies, child managers, etc. You're going to look those up, and then you're going to really start doing your homework about who's good, who's not good, who do I want to be entrusting of, and just like everything, the next thing you do is you're just not going to leave their site. You are not going to leave. You are going to be glue on them. You're going to be on every set. They're going to hate the fact that you're that mom that's on set and always has their eye on them.
Right.
But it's important because it's your job not to raise assholes. And that only happens by you watching them and you making sure that they're turning into humans that are good humans, not likable or unlikable, good humans. And you do that by really staying consistent and staying on them, and not like in an overbearing way, but as your child is entering this industry, it is really your job. You're their bodyguard.
Right.
You're the one that has to really go in there. And then also understand that being in the industry means many different things. Maybe it is getting your child involved in the local theater of the area. If they're in high school productions, middle school productions, support that. Get them into that framework, because being in the industry just means so many different things. Sure, my son is in front of a camera. He's on big screens. But that's not the only avenue. That's not the only option for him. My daughter's more of a, I'm on stage. I'm perfecting my craft every single time I get on stage. She always makes fun of Shola because she's like, you have 10 times to get it right. I'm live. I got to get it right every single time. First time, no variation. So they always have this back and forth of like, who really is who's the more difficult environment to work in. But really when that happens, when your child comes to you, whatever they want to do, right? But when your child does come to you and this is what they want to do, you're the eagle eye. You got to watch them, and you have to watch the people around them, because just like in everything else, whether you're on a sports team or you're in the industry, there are people that will be out there to try to damage your child and damage their ego, create insecurities, or physically damage them. And you got to just be on top of it. Right.
You've done a phenomenal job. I remember when, you were going to go out to Atlanta, you were asking me can you find out where I could get my ingredients to make, some Mexican food and all that stuff. And I was like, she's doing it the way it should be done. Like, he was already an older teen, but he wasn't 18. You're just like, I'm gonna be up there. I'm up in there. Like, you know what I mean? And I feel like that is super important. I know it might not be something that everyone can do, but if you're taking it seriously and you want to be, like you said, the bodyguard, the protector, he's grown up to be such a wonderful young man. He's reached out online, and just always, every time I've seen him since he was little till he's big, I remember when he was in your stomach, such a great job. And, to see them both, I saw, a snippet when they were both on the podcast, their podcast. And I was like, how old is she now? Like, cause she was this little when you guys were out here and stuff. So anyway.
Sure.
Carmelita, muchísimas gracias. Let people know how they can support you, how they can support the organization, all the different things that you want anyone to know about. This is your time. I'll also have it all in the show notes también.
Oh, awesome. I know. And Muchísimas gracias. You know, I always have lots of love for you. You really are you're the epitome of what I pictured when I said, let's bring these young people on. Let's bring these interns on. Let's have them come on. You're a wonderful mom. You're a great partner, and you always have been about your business. So I love that. You know, for the record, by the way, our logo was created by you, by Ritzy, and all our logos, actually, the Boyle Heights Arts Conservatory, KQBH, and the pizza company in front. And that is because you got to support your people. You just have to. So I am very thankful that you've been able to, come along and take me on your journey as much as possible. And I ask that if people are more interested in learning about the conservatory, you can go to our website, obviously, bharts.org. And I believe all our Instagram, Facebook, all of that is just the BHAC.
It is, yeah.
Just the BHAC. And That's awesome. So, stop in. We're a drop-in place. You could just drop in. If you are an artist and you feel you want to share your talent, whether you're animator or stop motion recorder, producer, then also give me a call, because we employ over 60 teaching artists a year, 60 people that would probably not have jobs doing what they love to do. So that's my pride and joy right there. Let's get people paid. Let's get people money. And let's keep our culture moving.
That's right. And please, if you're in the area, go stop by. It's an amazing space. I've seen the evolution of it, and the fact that not only are you helping these kids, people in the community, because not just kids, as you mentioned, the facilities, the crazy work that you've been doing to get the funds to have that level of facility for everybody in the community for free is outstanding. It's next level. You could probably teach master classes on how to do all these things, because it's an art form to do what you do. Carmelita, muchísimas gracias. Have a safe travels to Mexico, and I hope you get to rest and relax.
Thank you, homegirl. I appreciate you.
There you have it, folks. Carmelita Ramirez-Sanchez. What a dream. What a dream. The fact that I was able to thank her, but also that she was able to tell me what she saw in me. I mean, that never gets old. You're just like, oh, word? That's what you saw in me? Because I was just like this, solo Mexican girl in LA trying to navigate hip hop at a time. And I was always the one or only, and stuff like that. But to also hear her amazing story, and it makes sense now, like, oh, you've been supported since jump. You've been supported in this dream. So it was never a question of like, can I or can't I? It was just like, yeah, I will. I will do it. I will take up space. I will do this. I want to help the people. The system isn't right. Blah, 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 blah. So when you're supported in that way, I'm sure there was times where she maybe had a little bit of insecurity, but for the most part, I mean, ask anybody that knows Carmelita. Nah. For me, looking back, I remember thinking, oh, it's because she's been here already. She's been doing this for a long time. So that's where the confidence comes from. No, now that I hear her story, it's the confidence comes from probably a natural thing that she would be like this no matter what situation she would have been born in, right? She's an old soul también. But also because she was supported, it was just like, yeah, nah, I could do this. I could take up space. No question. And I love that. And I think that's such an example of how anyone that's a parent, a tia, tío, guardian of any sort, that's what the younger generation need. They need to be seen and supported so they can feel confident. Maybe they'll change, but maybe they can feel confident and change to, something else. But yes, fascinating. Shout out to Dr. Ramis, Rachel, shout out to Mona Lisa, my other, fellow hip hop rap life ladies, the crew, as we mentioned. I mean, the continuation of all of us, all of these women of color that came out of hip hop. We're still about that.
We're still about that life. We're still about helping and advocating others. So it's the essence of what, when we were growing up, what hip hop was about. Let's tell the stories of what's really happening in the streets. Let's tell the stories of the struggles of our people, and let's advocate for a better life. You know what I mean? So yes. So anyways, if you're listening to this when this drops, I was talking about, I think that I was going to be presenting at the AMBIES, which are the podcast awards that are brought to you by, or put on by, the Podcast Academy, which I'm a part of. This is my second year, barely right now, this 2024. And it was fantastic. Lilian Rivera rolled with me, and I had to do the red carpet. I learned some tips because, with my glasses and the glare and like my neck, I had to like figure things out. But she was peeping the scene and taking photos. You'll see them on the timeline, on the stream, or the whatever it's called. And excuse me, she was like, they take pictures. They have your name that you give them. You let them know you're coming through. They look up your name. They have a card, paper, and it has your name on it. And then someone holds it up so that the photographers, the videographers, and the people and the camera crews can take a picture of it so they know who the hell they're talking to. So I'm going down. Everyone's taking a picture. I'm wearing my "I Am My Answer's Vengeance" shirt. Please believe it. One of the photographers was like, "Oh, show your shirt." So I have a picture where I'm going like this. And then so I go down the line and everyone stops me. And then they ask me for some interviews at the end. So I just thought, in the podcast world, they're going to talk to everybody. Lillian was like, nah, they did not. They did not. That people after me, that took a couple pictures and they were like, okay, thank you. And I was like, oh, wow. So anyways, I was nervous. I had to get there earlier in the day so that we could rehearse. And then afterwards, it started at 6. It was live. Trixie Mattel hosted. She killed it. I mean, Lillian and I were cackling. It was fantastic. And then it was my turn to go up, and I was with Patrick Hill, who is, I believe, founder of Dystopia. Shout out to Patrick. He was my co-presenter. And we went up there and we did the thing. What I forgot was that I had gum in my mouth. I had gum in my mouth because every time I speak the past year, 2 years, every time I speak, I get nervous and my mouth gets hella dry. So I was like, let me get some gum so I have some saliva up in there. And then I forgot because I was like so stressed out about it. But what was great was that they said my name. This is the theme for the next couple of months, kids. My old new name. So it's my government name that's brand new, rearranged, because that's what it says on my birth certificate. And then it has my mom's maiden name is actually my last name, which I didn't know until earlier this year. So they say my name and then they say AKA Ritzy P. And then it helped me to calm down. And then I went up there, did the thing. We presented 3 awards and it was fantastic. I was like, whew, I could breathe. I could relax, And then immediately after we walk out and strangers come up to me and they say, wow, she's like, this one lady, she's like, I just want to say you're such a great presenter. I was like, oh, thank you. And then, we walk and then we go to the after party, long line. Then we get in there and then someone else came up to me and they said the thing. But what was crazy too is that a couple of days ago, I get a notice. I've been Getty imaged. So, when you see, there's an event, a Hollywood event, and you want to look for a photo of a celebrity. I'm not saying I'm a celebrity, but if you see a photo of a celebrity and then it has that overlay, it says Getty Images, and to get it without it, you have to buy it. Oh, I have 3 of those now, kids. 3 of those. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Crazy. So anyways, that was fantastic. And then, I'm in a couple of days, I'm about to bone out to NYC to go back to return for a second year to speak at NFT NYC. And then there's some, speaking engagements and some, appearances that we have to do as the women of Web3. Shout out to Sandy and the rest of the crew. And I got invited to go to this Women in Hip Hop Forum that's at the Lincoln Center on the 5th. Hopefully I can make it to that. Shout out to Marta Diaz for the invite. And I hope to finally get to meet her. She's another one that's in the scene that's contributed so much to uplifting and preserving the culture. And yeah, so
It's been a week, kids. It's been a week. I'm trying to stay healthy. Supernatural Bear, he's on the mend, but he was really, really sick. Luckily, it wasn't COVID. And then I had to go to a funeral. So yeah, it's the high highs and the low lows, but that's life. Life is lifing. We have a special episode that's coming up that's dropping, what is it? Not next Monday, but next Monday. So what is that? April 15th. You're not going to want to miss. If you're a woman of any sort and want to know more about the myths and realities of perimenopause and menopause, I have a special guest on April 15th. It's going to be dropping. We already recorded the episode. I learned so much. It's invaluable what's happening in this episode. So you're definitely you're going to want to watch or listen so that you can get the gems that have been dropped regarding this subject, because it's important. I mean, no one said anything. Did anyone say anything to you? Nah. And if you're a man, you need to listen to this too, because you need to see how this affects the women that you love that are in your life. April 15th, mark the calendar. Just make sure, listen to all the episodes, but especially if you're looking for answers to that, you want to listen to that. So remember, how can you support this podcast? Because we amplify diverse voices. First of all, you can leave a review. You could leave a comment. Make sure to subscribe and like if you're watching on the YouTubes. And then a free way is tell your folks, tell your peeps, and then tell your friends, right? That's how we get this out there to the peeps. Even more peeps, because diverse voices are unfortunately still lacking and still needing up in here, right? That's why this year, now that I'm in a second year in the Podcast Academy, I want to see how I can be more involved, because it was fantastic that I went to present and my co-presenter was a young Black gentleman. And then we presented 3 categories, one which was the DIY, and the people that won were run by Black women. It was called Stitch Please. How amazing is that? We were able to give them an award. So yes, we need to take up all the space. And a little, as they say in the web trees, a little alpha to be dropped. I'm going to be hosting some workshops on getting your podcast started, because everyone keeps asking me, how do you do this? And what should I do? Because some people start podcasts, but they have someone that records them. Maybe they have someone that edits it and does all the other stuff. I do all of these things, kids, all of these things. So I was like, yeah, let me put some stuff together. I'm going to do some beta ones first and get that down. And then I'm going to offer it to the general public. But if you are interested, then come on down, DM me, email me at hola@wordtoyourmama.com and let me know that you're interested so that we can make sure that you're kept abreast of what's happening in that realm. But yeah, that's it. And as always, we reap. Word to Your Mama is owned and produced by Ritzy P. Intro beat produced by Nico Beats. For partnership inquiries and contact info, check out wordtoyourmama.com. And as always, Word to Your Mama is brought to you by ritzyperiwinkle.com. And now, introducing
the Supernatural Bear Corner.
Supernatural Bear. Burp.